I have seen many times recently of all kinds of different churches or groups. They are posting all kinds of these authentic moments of worship, special events, something like that, when in all reality, they are very curated to get people to feel like they are missing out on something. Welcome back to the Sunday to Society podcast. I'm your host, Riley, and that's Bill back there. And if you haven't already, I encourage you to hit that subscribe button. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also like us on our Facebook page at Sunday to Society podcast, and you can follow us on our Instagram page at Sunday to Society. We're going to be jumping into the episode today and talking about why does it seem like everything is going to be or is a performance. And I really want us to frame this episode in thinking of why does it feel like, and we judge ourselves on the performance of anything and everything. And why does it even feel like sometimes everybody is watching? Why does it feel like no one is watching, yet it still feels like some sort of performance? We rehearse conversations long before we ever have them. We think about how moments will look while they are happening online. And even our private life gets mentally staged in our own minds. And when things don't really work out the way that we thought they would, or when it seems like we judge ourselves off of what the idea in our mind look like, and when it doesn't work out, we feel like, well, we didn't do a good enough job. And so really that lands us to the question of, when did life stop being something you live and start being something that you present to other people? And that not only is a issue that both Christians and non-Christians alike have, but it is also something that has crept into churches where we feel like our church service and our service to God has become a performance. And we'll be talking about all of those different things today. But I want you to imagine that if the scariest part in all of this is if we don't even notice we're doing it anymore, because we've turned it into such a performance and forgetting on why we do the things that we do at all. So we'll be discussing all of those different things today. How did we even get to this thought process or this place in our society where everything has become a performance, how that's crept into the church, and what God's word says about it. So let's jump into the episode today by talking about what's happening, this shift to performance. In fact, I would argue that this shift for things being very performative is kind of a invisible shift. It's not really one that we've noticed, but it's instead one that's slowly made progress over a long period of time and placed us into this situation where now everything has become very performative. And let's talk a little bit about what I mean by that. But let's first take a step back and talk about how life used to be and church used to be. It used to be that you lived and then you experienced something and then you remembered it something. Now, I want you to take a step back and think about what is one of the most memorable things that happened in church, or maybe it was a time that you had a experience where God began to work in your life and you lived in the moment, you experienced that thing, and then now you look back on it and remember it. And that's really how life used to be up until, I would say, the last 10-ish years or so, that where we once experienced things, experienced God, and then we remembered them and reflect and look back on them. But that's not how it is anymore at all. In fact, even church services and churches today, you lived in through those services, you experienced those services, and then you reflect and look back on some of the most memorable times that you had in a service. That's how life used to be, and that's how church services and Christians used to be. But what it is like now is that you've experienced those same things, so there is a little bit of an overlap. You experienced that service or that special meeting or that whatever it is, fill in the blank. You experienced those things, but then rather remembering those things, instead you evaluated them and then you presented them in front of other people. Now, why would you evaluate them? And what are you evaluating for? Well, the thing that you're evaluating is, how well will this do on social media? How well will this do in front of other people? Because ultimately, the better that it does, the more people it get pushed out to in the algorithm, and then you present it in front of more and more people. Now, what would be the goal in doing that? Why would you want to experience something and then evaluate it and then present it in front of other people? I guess it really draws down to what our motivation is for that. Are we truly wanting to experience something with God in the moment and for our own selves? Or are we experiencing that so that we can drive more clicks, likes, comments, subscribers, whatever it might be? What are we trying to do in all of that? This isn't just something that's exclusive to non Christians or Christians. It happens in churches and it happens really all kinds of different places. And I want us to give us some examples of what that looks like. Now, I want you to think back to a time where you were sitting in a restaurant. Maybe it was a nicer restaurant. Maybe it was a special restaurant for a special occasion. But you look around and you saw people taking photos of their food before eating it instead of just eating it. Maybe they took their phone out and they were trying different angles, trying different lightings. They were taking pictures of that food, whatever it might be, so that they could either one, share it with other people on social media. And I guess that's probably what is happening most of the time. Or maybe they were taking that picture so that they could enjoy it, enjoy the memory of it later on. They were taking pictures for some sort of goal. But like I said just a moment ago, I think most of the time when people are taking photos of their food, they are wanting to post it on Instagram or Snapchat or Facebook or whatever it might be. And by doing that, they are trying to curate and I use authentic in quotation marks. They're trying to curate that authentic moment for content. They don't really care, at least initially, about the food in the moment. Now, they eventually will get to it, but what they are doing is they're trying to curate a moment for content on some sort of platform. Now, again, their goal could be for this platform. Well, what am I trying to push this content out for? Am I trying to show other people, hey, look at the type of restaurant that I am currently in? Are they saying, look at this expensive dish that I am eating, or fill in the blank? It could be not only something with food, it could be some sort of look at this type of location that I am taking a vacation to, so that other people might be able to see, oh, well, look how wealthy I am, look how successful I am, look at whatever, fill in the blank. And again, this isn't just something that people experience just on everyday life, but this is also something that has crept into the church. Now, what do I mean by that? I have seen many times recently of all kinds of different churches or groups. They are posting all kinds of these authentic moments of worship, special events, something like that, when in all reality, they are very curated to get people to feel like they are missing out on something. Of people talking about a youth event that is going to be taking place over the course of the summer. And during these series of posts, they were trying to be very trendy, very trying to go viral type posts where they were trying to be authentic, but in all reality, it wasn't genuine at all. In fact, it felt very scripted. It felt very forced. It was trying to get teenagers specifically to make it feel like they are missing out on this event. And they were trying to do this so that they could go viral, and they were rewriting actual emotions and trying to turn it into something that is very postable. They weren't, in fact, actually, taking a step back, after this series of posts, they try to change the narrative on these very quickly and try to turn it into something that was trying to go viral into something that was very somber and very spiritual very quickly. That narrative very shifted quickly. In fact, they were trying to change the narrative altogether by making even private decisions that might be made at this type of youth rally into something that is how they further perceived it. Now, what do I mean? They were trying to shift, here's all of the fun that you'll have, rather than focusing on here's how this particular youth rally, this particular thing might shift and change your life. See, the fun, the special events, the things like that are what going to make memories in the short term. But ultimately, the long term are going to be the decisions that you make for Christ and a teenager at this particular event. And as I talk to different people, especially recently, the more I hear about the times that they had as teenagers and the decisions that they made for God in these events, they ultimately changed their life altogether. They don't talk about the special games and activities that they did at these events. No, instead, years after they're removed from it, they talk about the decisions that they make. And we feel like if we perform better in these viral moments or create these viral moments, they're going to perform better. Therefore, more decisions are going to be made for Christ in these type of events. And that can't be further from the truth at all. Instead, we've made our life into where we are no longer just participants in life. Instead, we are editors of it. I've got a friend who is a video editor, and he owns a video business. In fact, he's been on the podcast before. Well, his job or one of the many jobs that he does with his business is he will edit videos. And when he's editing videos, what he's doing is he's cutting out all of the bad parts that nobody wants to see, so that when he presents the final video, what he's doing is showing what he wants people to see. And unfortunately, that's what a lot of churches, that's what a lot of Christians are doing in their not only online presence, but also in church services on a weekly basis. And that's what's taking place throughout Christianity today, but is also in the church. But then there's also a little bit deeper of an issue going on here. It's really this internal audience. Now, the internal audience would be who? Well, the internal audience would be just you. In fact, this, as we peel back the onion a little bit, here's really where the real shift is. It really comes down to a heart issue, doesn't it? It's when this shift begins to take place and our mindset goes to, it's not just the people that are watching, it's what they are now. In fact, we ourselves, as we do this to ourselves, we are becoming our self-censor, our self-edit, our self-performer, and really the audience has moved inside of our mind. We're doing it because it makes us feel better. We're doing it because I want to be seen by other people. Now, that's on a personal level. Let's talk a little bit about a corporate level in a church service. There are many churches today that are very much concerned about how they are perceived in the community. Now, there's nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, I would argue to say that the local church should have a good standing in the community. They shouldn't be looked at like they are a bunch of hateful Christians that don't care about anybody but themselves. That's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I am saying that the local church should have that good standing in the community. However, where many churches go wrong is where they have made that their entire identity, not only amongst in their community, but around other churches of the same flavor of faith. They have become so concerned about how others perceive them around them that they have forgotten their true mission as a church. They have totally forgotten about who their true intended audience should be. And that true intended audience should be the Lord Jesus Christ. But we really have to take a look at ourselves and think, well, why am I having this type of mindset? Why do I try to create these moments for other people? Why do I try to create these types of events? Let me give you another real world example as it relates to the church. I have heard of churches who have had people come to the altar to get saved 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different times. And after every one of those times, they feel like they need to be baptized. Now, why do they feel like they need to make that decision that many times? Is it because they've lost their salvation and need to regain it? No, that's not it at all. Do they feel like those previous times they didn't actually get saved? Maybe they feel that way. But why do they feel like they need to have those type of performances? I would venture to say that it's because they want to impress other people around them. Why do we have people who, when they get up and sing a special or sing a choir special or something like that, that they feel like they need to go the extra mile and make it into performance? Why do they do that? What's their motivation? I think the motivation in that is they want to have other people be impressed by their talents or their decisions or something like that. Basically, they want to create an in life viral moment that gets other people talking. And when that talking begins to stop, then they have to do something else to get people talking about them again. And then there's really this, you've got the ball rolling and it never really stops. And that's what we've really curated a culture for in many churches. That's what our culture is beginning to curate in our own life. And with the invention of social media, it's really made this issue worse and deeper. And we really have to take a step back and think, well, why am I personally doing all of this? Why does my church try to create these types of environments? That's really what we need to take a look at. Let's take a look at some data and some reality in the culture. I think the data points to this is that our attention and social scale have been cut drastically. Over 5 billion people use social media globally. Out of the, I think it's 7 billion people on the earth right now, that 5 billion of those use social media in some platform globally. And that the average user spends about 2 hours per day on social platforms, different ones, of course. And so when as many people are glued to these things for this amount of time per day, we shouldn't be surprised at all that our culture has built this type of environment and that it has crept into the church. We've also allowed this self monitoring behavior to increase our self consciousness, to allow ourselves to manage how we impress other people. That we then have cultivated this idea of comparison based thinking in the sense of, well, this person did that, therefore I must do that. Or my video didn't do as good as other people's video, therefore I'm going to compare myself to them and basically just copy them so that I can get the same type of results that they are. And that's where we've kind of really led ourselves into this self-monitoring behavior. Now, again, let me give you another example. Why do I wear headphones when recording in this podcast? Is it because I want to tune out other noises, outside noises? I guess that could be part of it. But the reason that I wear headphones and don't go without headphones in recording podcasts is for self monitoring. You see, when I talk into this microphone, what I hear in my headphones is my own voice. It helps me self monitor the level of my voice, the level of the volume coming into the microphone, all of these different things. It's for self monitoring. But we have built ourselves as Christians in churches into self monitoring behavior, in that we've been trying to self monitor ourselves by comparing what we're putting out content wise into other churches or amongst other churches. And here's what it's built up to. It's built up to this psychological pressure that where we now try to study what other people are doing so that we can replicate that same thing. In fact, studies on audience awareness shows people change behavior even when they think they might be observed. And all of this really reinforces this performance mode even in our private life, that we need to get as much done as we can in the short amount of time so that we can push this content in further so we can do better. And this again goes to pastors preaching behind the pulpit week after week. They will compare their preaching to some other well-known name, maybe even taking their sermon word for word or thought for thought. And we've really built this culture, not only just in society, but also in the church, of everything has to be done so that other people can consume it. And if we're not getting the results that we see other people getting, then we feel like we're not doing a good enough performance. Now, why is all of this happening? What is the root cause of this? And I think there's a couple of different things here. It's number one, this identity shift from being to being perceived. That you are no longer just you, that you are a representation of you. Again, I go back to that question, why are we doing the things that we are doing? Now, ultimately, the goal of every Christian, the goal of every church should be this: to bring honor and glory to God by carrying out the Great Commission. and reaching other people. That's what our goal should be. It shouldn't be try to build up a online presence. It shouldn't be to try to drive numbers and clicks and subscribers. It shouldn't be any of that. And we think that when we are not getting those types of results, then our performance isn't good enough. God's not concerned about our performance. You know what he is concerned about? He's concerned about our heart condition. And that's what he's concerned about. We'll talk about some more of that here in just a second. Number 2, visibility replaced meaning. The more that I'm seen amongst other people, then I must have more meaning then. That's why it goes back to this performance thing of why do people many times try to go over the top in order to be seen? Because they feel like the more they're seen, the more they must have meaning. That if I'm not seen, then I must not have any meaning at all. And that's further from the truth. God doesn't care how many subscribers we have. God doesn't care how big our churches are on a Sunday morning. God doesn't care about all of that. You know what he does care about? Number 1, are we doing the tasks that he's given us to do? Number 2, what's our heart condition like? Number 3, how many people are we trying to tell about him? God doesn't care about how visible we are. He doesn't care about any of that. He cares about, are we carrying out the things that he's given us to do? That's what he cares about. And see, unfortunately, a lot of churches, a lot of Christians have built their life on, hey, the more I can be seen, then the more I must be validated, and the more I must mean to other people. But that doesn't mean it at all. In fact, you can usually tell when somebody has fallen into this trap by the type of things that they post, both on a Christian personal level and on a corporate church level, on the things that they're trying to push, the way that they want to be perceived. I see it all the time. People who want to be perceived as a super spiritual Christian. People who want to be seen as, oh, I'm somebody who does fill in the blank. I'm somebody who sings in church on a weekly basis. They want to be perceived as something many times that they're not. And the more that they are seen, the more they feel like they have meaning in life. It's number 2. Number 3, validation becomes a feedback loop. A lot of times when dealing with audio stuff, sometimes you create this feedback loop where you hear that loud ringing and stuff. Maybe you've been sitting in church one time and the feedback loop got out of whack and you start hearing this loud ringing noise. But the way that we've created that with validation today is we post something, we see the reaction of it. A lot of people will post something that will have an initial shock factor and try to drum up some sort of reaction, both positive or negative. And then they will try to identify the adjustment to that post. Where did it go wrong? Why did it or did it not go viral? And then they'll repeat that. And it's creating this loop. Churches do the exact same thing. They will post something, or the pastor will get up and preach something. They see the reaction from it, both positive or negative. They will identify the adjustments that need to take place, and then they'll just repeat that over and over and over again so that they could draw a bigger crowd next time. They could get more engagement next time. They could fill in the blank, whatever it might be. And they feel like they find more validation in the better it producing that this particular thing does. And there's this feedback loop that begins to take place. And then before we know it, here we are searching for validation, not from God, but in the applause of other people. That's number 3. Number 4, the authenticity becomes performative too. Even if we are trying to be real with people, it has become a style, a brand, a curated expression. Now, what does all of that mean? That we have equated authenticity with being performative as well. This phrases such as, oh, I'm going to be real with you, or I'm going to be honest with you, or things of that nature. It's become a brand type or a style type or this type of curated expression that I'm going to have with you. And didn't God call us to be authentic? Didn't God call for us to be real? Of course he has. Now, we've been talking about all these things happen in Christians' life, in the life of the church, but let's see what God has to say about it in his word. And the first verse I want us to look at is Matthew 6, verse number 1. At Matthew 6, verse number 1 says, "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven." Now here, this is the Sermon on the Mount. And what is Christ telling the audience? That when you go to the temple to give your alms, don't do it to be seen by other people. Now, when we post something online, when we try to make something performative, what's our motivation? We've already discussed that several minutes ago. In fact, this verse should serve as a warning to us, for visibility corrupts our intentions. The more that I am seen by people, then it begins to slowly corrupt what our true intentions are. And when Christ says, "Take heed that ye do not your alms before men to be seen of them," well, what other areas of our life could that apply to? He continues on in the same chapter, but down in verse number 5, he says, "And when thou prayest, thou shalt not do as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogue and in the corners of the street, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward." Again, it goes back to our motivation of, why am I doing this particular thing? Why am I giving to in this context, why am I giving to the synagogue? Or later on, why am I praying before people? It really lends to the fact of, am I doing this for performance or am I doing this for pleasing God? Again, motivations are a huge, huge thing. And I'm big on motivations. Why are you doing, or why are we doing the thing that we are doing? Are we doing it to drive clicks? Are we doing it to performance? Are we doing it to seek validation from other people? Or am I doing it to please God? Paul writes in Galatians 1, verse number 10, he says, "For do I now persuade men or God? Or do I seek to please men? For if I yet please men, I should not be the servant of God." What's Paul saying here? That I cannot serve God and seek the audience approval. That, in fact, later on, he mentions more and develops this thought a little bit more. But in fact, he's saying that if I'm seeking the approval of the audience, if my motivation is to seek validation from those types of things, that might not even be a servant of Christ, if that's my motivation. Because if you haven't noticed, that a lot of the motivations for these types of things are for people who are seeking validation, not from God, but seeking validation from other people. And what does Paul say about this here? That if that's my goal in life, is to seek to please men, I might as well go off and do something else. And if that is my goal, to drive more clicks, to do whatever this, both on a personal level and on a corporate level, then we might as well go do something else. That's what Paul is saying here. And if my goal is to drive more things, then what am I doing? That's what he's saying. 1 Samuel 16, a Old Testament example. In 1 Samuel 16, verse number 7, this is when Samuel is going before Jesse to pick out the next king of Israel. It says in verse number 7 there, "But the Lord said unto Samuel, Look not on his countenance or on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth. For man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart." We've already alluded to this plenty of times before. What is God more concerned about? Our outward performance, or is he more concerned about our heart posture? Well, the obvious answer is, of course, God's more concerned about our heart posture. And if our heart posture is to drive more clicks, to be more performative in our worship, in our preaching, in our fill in the blank, then we've got the totally wrong motivations. We've got totally wrong heart posture. Sure, we might have other people fooled based on our performance that we get on social media, but you know who sees right through it? It's God. God sees right through it. He sees our motivation. And you know what? God is not responding to your presentation of yourself, or on your online presence, or you in front of the church before other people. He is responding to your reality. And if you're doing it and being fake, he sees right through it. So let's say that you are having some issues with this. I would say this issue is something that's not just exclusive to younger generation. In fact, many times it's an issue amongst older generations as well. Now, sometimes the younger generations get a bad rap because they will do it and post it online, whereas the older generation won't. But where the older generation will do is they will talk about it amongst other people their same age. So here's what we should do about it. Number one, do things without recording them. Now, whether it be something you read about in your devotions, whether it's some sort of ministry that you've served in, whether it be some sort of special that you sang in church, whether it be fill in the blank. It could be all kinds of different things. Do those things without recording them and posting them online, where there's no documentation, there's no explanation as to why you did it, and therefore there is no proof. Because when we do things like that, you know what it shows who we're truly doing it for? We're not doing it for some random person that we follow on Instagram or we're friends with on Facebook, but instead we are doing those things then so that we could be seen by one person, and that's God. But you know what the temptation is? The temptation is this. Well, if I didn't record it, if I didn't post it, did it actually happen? Well, of course, the answer is, well, yeah, it did happen. But the temptation that we many times fall ourselves in is, I do those things so that I can see by other people. That's number one. Number two, remove the imaginary audience. What do I mean by that? Next time you do something, ask yourself this question. If no one ever knew this, would I still do it? And if the answer to that is, well, no, then we have to remove that imaginary audience. If I were to do this in church, or if I didn't post this devotion that I read this morning, would I still even do it? If the answer is no, then I think we have to look back at our motivation. And when we remove that imaginary audience, what we are doing is this. We're placing our true motivations in check, saying, if, yeah, I would still do it, then I think that reveals that we are truly seeking to please God and not just trying to drive an audience. That's number two. Number three, reclaim private identity. You know, our life doesn't need a packaging. It doesn't need this special packaging so that we can be seen by other people. Not every moment that we live needs to find validation. Thoughts don't always need to be expressed online for other people to see. Even if they might be the hottest take or the most controversial take or whatever it might be, not everything needs to be posted online. Just like not everything needs to be said behind a pulpit. Or not every thought needs to be expressed in general. We need to really reclaim that private identity. And we should also, number four, separate expression from existence. Don't feel like everything you do is meant to be performed, whatever it might be. Fill in the blank. Not everything you do needs to be a performance. You know why? Because honestly, God's not concerned about performance. You know what he is concerned about? Faithfulness. You know what God is concerned about? Motivations. You know what God also is concerned about? Our realness with him. You know, many times when people do this, when they are seeking performance and validation, many times it's fake. It's for the wrong reasons altogether. As we said a moment ago, God already sees right through this. And he knows what our true motivations are. Even though we might have everybody else fooled, we can't have God fooled at all. And as we close out this episode, you know, the goal was never to live perfectly. In fact, it never has been. You know why? Because we're imperfect people living in an imperfect world. The only person to ever live perfectly was Jesus Christ himself, wasn't it? And the goal for us as Christians is to never live perfectly. We're going to make mistakes, but you know what the goal was? The goal was just to live honestly. That's what it is. Genuineness, realness. That's what God's more concerned about than with performative and fakeness and things to drive clicks. That's what God's concerned about. Honesty, reality, all of those things. Because you don't lose yourself all at once through performance. You lose yourself every time life becomes a performance instead of a reality. See, many times people have built this performance and then they begin to live in this false reality, or they choose to ignore reality. You know, God's called us to be real with people. He's called us to share a real gospel with real people, not put on a performance so that we can make the church down the street jealous on whatever it might be. God wants us not to be performative. God instead wants us to be real with him and real with other people. Not seeking validation from other people, but instead seeking validation from him. I hope I've given you some things to think about in this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. You can like us on our Facebook page at Sunday to Society Podcast, and you can also follow us on our Instagram at Sunday to Society over there. I hope you have a great day, and God bless.